From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Happy Wednesday and welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. It's January 22nd, 2025, a packed show for all of y'all today. Lots of news. I mean, lots. One, we're going to obviously talk about the pardoning of Silk Road Ross Ulbricht by President Trump yesterday in what was a bit of a shock, but we got to get context behind what was going on there, including a record-breaking DDoS attack and so much more happening, including something you all need to be paying attention to, which is how Microsoft Teams is now being utilized as a way to overcome phishing and actually take over devices altogether. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. Let's get the show rolling. I did not get my espresso this morning. I'm recording a bit earlier than usual. And so the place where I could get espressos from when I had one yesterday is not yet open, or it wouldn't have made it in time. One of those two things. Either way, let's get the show rocking and rolling this morning. Thank you all for tuning in. Coffee cup cheers for everyone having a drink. And let's get the ball rolling. We'll kick off with this new record-breaking DDoS attack that took place. And the DDoS attacks have been increasing, by the way, in like volume and frequency. It has not gone away. The threat predominantly is mitigated, and it's become almost a nuisance in a way, simply because of companies like Cloudflare and others that are able to deal with the traffic, that technology has gotten to a point. Well, a number of HTTP DDoS assaults are steadily increasing to outpace Layer 3 and Layer 4 attacks in the fourth quarter, according to Cloudflare, at an average of around 4,870 DDoS attacks every hour. The web security firm blocked roughly 21.3 million DDoS attacks in 2024, up 53% compared to the approximately 14 million that they blocked in 2023. Just understand, this is where security partners come into play. And look, Cloudflare doesn't sponsor the show. They don't pay for anything. You'll hear from our sponsors later today. That's our friends over at Nudge Security. Here later in the show, not later today, later in the show, but hopefully you'll hear from them later today by going and checking them out, because they're definitely a great tool. But when you look at companies like Cloudflare that do this kind of work quietly, and then they release a report and we'll go, whoa, how did all that happen? How did we not see it? Because when you do the job well, you're often invisible. So that's the case here with the folks over at Cloudflare's. During the last 3 months of the year, Cloudflare said they blocked 3.5 million HTTP DDoS attacks and 3.4 million Layer 3 and Layer 4 attacks. The technology provider had also noticed that 13 of the top user agents most frequently observed in DDoS attacks were Chrome versions that ranged from version 118 to 129er, although the browser is now on version 132 for both desktop and mobile devices, meaning they're leveraging older devices there. The largest DDoS attack blocked during the last 3 months was a 5.6 terabyte per second UDP DDoS assault launched by the Mirai variant botnet against an ISP in Eastern Asia. So 5.6 terabytes per second. And just last week and the week before, we talked about the Mirai botnet being dismantled, and now you understand why. That 5.6 terabyte per second UDP, not TCP IP. So UDP, a different type of data packet, very, very powerful. Like, it's very common, and in some cases it's looked at as unreliable, but it's fast, speed. And that's why they used UDP, is because it actually has the speed. The attack lasted around 80 seconds and originated from 13,000 unique source IP addresses, each contributing an average of around a gig per second. The previous record for Cloudflare was 3.8 terabits per second. So this is almost 50% of that. While most of the network layer DDoS attacks in the fourth quarter of last year did not exceed 500 megabits per second, the number of volumetric network layer DDoS attacks reached 420. And that's, again, almost 1,800% quarter over quarter increase. So again, DDoS attacks remain a serious and significant threat. But when your security partners know to get the job done, it's not a disruption. And this is, by the way, a great example when you talk about picking the right security partner, using the right examples, kind of when you're talking to leadership about the different companies you use and why you use them. This type of data, when you go, this was all happening last year, and you couldn't feel it, not in our supply chain, not necessarily within our environment. That kind of reassures folks on the executive side of the fact that you're making wise investments in cybersecurity. So again, you got to realize how to leverage this information for politicking a little bit inside your organization as well. Powerschool is notifying students and educators that their PII was compromised in a December 2024 data breach. So Powerschool, used by many education facilities across the country and the world, said that they had a security incident that happened on December 28th, and it only involved the student information system environments, which were accessed through the PowerSource community-focused customer support portal. They have no evidence that any other Powerschool products were affected as a result of the incident, or that there is any malware or continued unauthorized activity in their environment. The data breach led to information such as names, contact details, dates of birth, medical information, social security numbers, and other related information being compromised. No credit card, no financial information was compromised there, meaning no credit card or banking information. The company initially disclosed the incident to the SIS community on January 7th and shared additional details on Friday of last week when it announced that the impacted individuals are provided with 2 years of free identity theft and credit monitoring service. Again, the cloud-based solution works with over 18,000 schools and school districts across the world, and they help more than 60 million students. So, the school system getting it there. Yesterday, in the Oval Office, President Trump was joined by Sam Altman and a whole bunch of slew of tech executives with a $500 billion pledge, $100 billion to $500 billion over the next 4 years in developing an AI infrastructure in the US. So very, very quickly, I mean, obviously, if you're an investor, if you looked at the shares for SoftBank and Oracle, I mean, those just absolutely went up. The companies are committing $100 billion to the venture and plan to invest up to $500 billion over the next 4 years. The plans, which some of the key elements are still unknown, primarily relies around the idea of building more power to support AI data centers and more AI data centers in order to make it more accessible for innovators to be able to access the technology and for companies to do just that. The total figure, if realized, would be a large, even by Silicon Valley standards, underscores the extent of tech companies and government officials betting on it. Sam Altman leading the way there, obviously, with Masayoshi Son from SoftBank and Oracle chairman and CTO Larry Ellison, who all went to the White House for the announcement on the second day of President Trump's administration. Stargate's first data center will be in Texas. The site, which started construction last year, will be operated by Oracle and used by OpenAI, according to people familiar with the project. OpenAI said it would operate the venture, while SoftBank will finance it. Stargate will have a separate board of directors and hire a new CEO. SoftBank's son will be the chairman of Stargate. Stargate plans to bring on additional equity investors. And SoftBank is also planning to raise debt from third parties to pay for some of the project. In a separate announcement, Microsoft also said it would continue to be the primary provider of cloud computing for OpenAI and would also allow the startup to use other providers on a case-by-case basis. So Goldman Sachs has estimated that companies, including the American tech giants, would spend an estimated $1 trillion on capital expenditures in the coming years. That would include large outlays of data centers, chips, and power grids. And a lot of that investment is coming because President Trump, on his first day, fulfilled a campaign promise, rescinded an executive order around curbing the risk posed by AI models to consumers and national security. They've yet to issue a replacement for it, but the replacement shouldn't come by executive order. And that's the thing that should be made clear to the Trump administration, that any sort of rule, any sort of curb of technology should come from a congressional law which provides stability for the growth of AI. So if every 4 years an EO is going to come through and it's going to change the whole industry and it's going to require you to build a task force and have to adjust and have to build it out, then the investments don't get there, right? So the only way to get investments into a tech and keep them, the $500 billion, a great beginning to invest in AI to afford the American population and the American people the ability to be pioneers in AI by building out this infrastructure and reducing all the red tape should come with the backing of a congressional and Senate passed bill that goes into law with oversight around AI safety, because there's got to be a balance between the two. We can't just say go build and do whatever. There is a threat to people's personal data, personal safety, mental health. There's a whole bunch of risks that exist within AI that require some sort of oversight and some sort of ground rules that are drawn in the sand that shouldn't be an executive order to begin with. The fact that we still run this country by executive order, that's now the de facto norm, is problematic and it's not sustainable. The three branches of government, the way the founders envisioned this country, is that Congress and the Senate pass the bills. The executive ensures that those bills don't violate the rights of Americans and then sign them into law. And the judiciary upholds those laws from being violated. And that's how it should be done there. So again, good news there. But the big story that's got a lot of people kind of reeling on both sides, and we're going to give some context, is Trump announcing the pardon of Ross Ulbricht, the founder of the Silk Road, which was an underground website. Obviously, everyone knows. If you've ever been in cybersecurity, you know Silk Road. You know the whole story. There's been documentaries and even movies made around the capture and the investigation that went into Ross Ulbricht. And President Trump yesterday giving him a full and unconditional pardon, saying the scum that worked to convict him were some of the same lunatics who were involved in the modern day weaponization of government against me. Trump called Ulbricht's prison sentence ridiculous, and he had promised to help Ulbricht during a speech at the Libertarian Party National Convention last May, and again stood by what he promised. He's delivering, whether you like it or not. I mean, just to kind of give you some context, President Biden just pardoned and not only commuted the sentences, but released 2 cop killers from jail. So if you want to talk about moral clarity, neither one has it, just to be absolutely sure of that. The TSA chief behind the cyber directives for aviation, pipeline, and rail has been ousted as part of the transition team. That's fairly normal here. The record likes to typically make a big deal out of nothing. But this one, again, with a little bit of bias from the record here, but on January 20th at noon, any person who's a political appointee, it's the custom and the norm is they submit their resignation. And then the transition team and the administration says, "I'd like to keep you, you're rehired," or "No, thank you, goodbye." Obviously, knowing that this administration was coming to upend all existing things that have happened over the last 4 years in the administration, if you for a second were still in a position where you thought you were still going to remain, then I don't know what planet you've been living on. So TSA Administrator David Pekoski, who was appointed by President Trump during his first term and maintained in that role under President Biden, has ended his time at the TSA, and a new administrator will be put in place. I mean, TSA's existence is at this point even questionable to begin with. The fact that they wrote cybersecurity policy, the fact that they were giving authority over cybersecurity for airline, pipeline, and rail, and not to CISA, is a whole other issue all of within itself that I've talked about continuously on the show, that TSA had no business being in the cyber game to begin with. And in other news there, the CSRB, the Cyber Safety Review Board, Chris Krebs finds himself fired again by President Trump. And how sweet is that sound when you say, "Chris Krebs, you're fired"? If there was ever anyone who endangered the mission of CISA, that was Chris Krebs. And so he is now been fired again from the Cyber Safety Review Board by President Trump. The Cyber Safety Review Board was the independent review board that was kind of overlooking. They weren't investigating the Salt Typhoon. They were making recommendations based on the Salt Typhoon breach and so forth. And so in a letter dated January 20th, Acting Secretary of DHS Benjamin C. Hoffman said the move was meant to avoid misuse of resources and terminated all current memberships on the advisory committees immediately. And that's across all committees in CISA and DHS everywhere. So it's not just the CSRB, but Chris Krebs finds himself again on that side of the aisle where he's getting told to pack his shit and get out. And that's that. So there's that for that. Let's get into some vulnerabilities. ABB is notifying their customers that they have over 1,000 vulnerabilities in product made. According to our researcher, the vulnerabilities were discovered by Jogo Kristic, who is known for cybersecurity research aimed at building management and access control systems in ABB Cyclone Flexon and ABB Cyclone Aspect Building Energy Management and Control Solutions. He said he told Security Week he uncovered just over 1,000 vulnerabilities in the Aspect product, including many with critical and high severity ratings, and 35 security holes in the Flexon products. The wide range of flaws were found, including unauthorized file access and manipulation of XSS, CSRF, SSRF, and IDOR, security bypass, denial of service, SQL injection, and password-related issues that could be exploited for remote code execution, obtaining sensitive information, and even causing disruption. ABB advised customers not to expose these systems to the internet. However, the impacted products are used around the world, and researchers believe around 1,000 facilities have these connected to the web. And then again, that's one of the big problems with OT networks and stuff like this, is they'll say the vendor will make the product and say, put it in a closed air gap network that only you can use. That's not always doable. And this is one of those cases where there's a whole slew of vulnerabilities within these products that are internet facing. So if you are internet facing and you have these products internet facing, you may want to look at putting them behind several firewalls, potentially limiting the access, maybe a data diode, and so forth, in order to ensure that they don't face those risks. Google Ads is again being abused by threat actors to spread malware using a fake homebrew website to infect Macs and Linux devices with an info stealer that's stealing credentials, browser data, and even crypto wallets. The malicious Google Ad campaign was spotted by Ryan Chenicky, who warned on X about the risk of malware infection. The malware is used in this campaign is Amos Stealer, aka Atomic, which is an info stealer designed for macOS systems, sold to cyber criminals for just a mere $1,000 a month subscription. The malware was recently seen in malvertising campaigns promoting fake Google Meet conferencing pages and is currently the go-to stealer for cyber criminals that target Apple users. So upon reaching the site, the visitor is then prompted to install Homebrew by pasting a command shown in the macOS terminal or Linux shell prompt. The legitimate Homebrew site provides a similar command to execute and install the legitimate software. Everyone running the command shown by the fake website, it'll download and execute malware on the device. Homebrew project leader Mike McQuaid stated that the project is aware of the situation and highlighted that it's beyond their control, absolutely, but something to be mindful of as users. And finally, ransomware gangs are getting increasingly sophisticated when it comes to targeting organizations. And now, instead of adopting email bombing, they're adopting email bombing techniques where they're flooding emails and then they're posing as tech support on Microsoft Teams calls, tricking employees to allow remote control and installing malware on company networks through that access. The threat actors are sending thousands of spam messages over a short period of time. They then call the target from an adversary-controlled Office 365 instance. They pretend to be calling from IT support to help clean up their box, the whole nine. Once they do that, then they get in, they get remote option, they get the remote into that device, and then once in, they'll drop a jar file and a Python script hosted on an external SharePoint link. They'll then use that to download a legitimate Proton VPN executable that's side-loaded as a malicious DLL. And then the DLL creates an encrypted C2 communication channel with external IPs, providing them remote access to the compromised computer. They also ran the Windows management instrumentation and WOMI to check system details, and deployed second-stage Java malware to execute RP Pivot, a pen testing tool that allows for SOX S4 proxy tunneling for sending commands. So you can tell they're using legitimate tools. They get in, and that's how they do it, and no one would be the wiser of it. So something to definitely keep in mind. You want to definitely keep an eye on Teams and calls coming in from Teams. You want to limit incoming call from Teams to only your own domain. You can set that up. You can also set it that all Teams calls that come from IT support will say IT support with your company name, something along those lines, and then you would send that out as a notice to all employees, so that when they get a team calls like this, that someone's asking them to get remote access, that they would think twice about doing so and actually be alert to it. And now, folks, a quick message from our friends over at Nudge Security, and our final story right after. Hey, security gang. I'm so happy to welcome back Nudge Security to the show. And let's talk a little bit about identity risks, data security risks, and third-party risks, and what do they all have in common? They're made a whole lot worse by SaaS sprawl. Every new SaaS account adds a new identity to secure a new place where sensitive data could end up, and a new vendor risk management assessment you need to complete. Nudge Security addresses those risks at the source, helping you to protect and manage all of your apps, identities, and data anywhere and everywhere where it can happen. It all starts with discovery. Within minutes of starting your free trial, you'll have a full inventory of every SaaS account ever created by anyone in your org, along with insights into authentication methods, app-to-app integrations, vendor risk insights, and more. My team and I did this last summer. It was absolutely mind-boggling what we found. It helped us really kind of put a plan together and start a method of trying to automate security and governance tasks like detecting risks and misconfiguration. It helped us conduct user access reviews and help us offboard employees from specific apps that we didn't even know existed. It freed up our time for a lot more strategic work and vendor security profiles for every app, even Gen AI tools. It helped us do all of that, and it automated it, which I'm a big fan of. Nudge Security is graciously offering everyone a free 14-day trial by going to nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. That's nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. The link is in the show notes as well. Go get your free 14-day trial now. Thanks to our friend over at Nudge Security for their support. Again, this Teams issue here is going to be significant, and it's a new method, essentially by flooding the mailbox to create the reason of why IT calls your employees. So the training and the awareness that's needed here is different from the traditional training methods you would use. So, again, this goes to the idea that awareness stops 90% of these problems. And if you want to stop it, you've got to, put in the controls within Teams. And then the second thing to do is raise awareness to these issues, because they're having a lot of success doing this. So the more successful it is, the wider spread it'll be, and the more they'll target organizations, and people won't think anything of it, right? Remote work, people won't think much of it. So something to keep in mind here. That's it for our show this morning. Again, we'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, share, like, comment. If you have any stories you want us to cover, take a look at anything that's worth of the time here at the CyberHub Podcast, please let us know. You can do that on LinkedIn, through our website at cyberhubpodcast.com, or any other way. Until then, have a great rest of your day, y'all. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.